Welcome back to the High School Bekius program. We're doing Chavdalad and Beis and Moed Katan. Today's Gemara has three main topics. First is the burial and hesped processions for babies and children, Chas v'shalom. Then we're going to discuss the holidays that interrupt Avelos and how long they are considered in the interruption of Shloshim. How many days are they counted for towards counting up to 30 days of Shloshim? And the last topic is people who are non-relatives who, for a person, I would have to tear Kriya as well. The Gemara says, Amar of Gidol, Bar Menashe, Amar Shmuel, Halacha Rabbi Gamliel. We follow Rabbi Gamliel when it comes to saying that Rosh Hashanah is considered one of the holidays in order of breaking Avelos. Igadamani lahadar of Gidol, Bar Menashe, aha. Some quoted the statement of Gidol in the following context: Kol Shoshim Yom Tinok Yotze Bechik, that a baby that's less than 30 days old that passed away Chas v'shalom, they bring him to the cemetery, holding him in their hands, in their lap, not in a coffin. That's considered respectful for a baby, not in a more elaborate procession. Nikbar be'isha achad shtei anoshim, a small crowd comes there, even just one woman and two men. However, for yichud purposes, you can't have just one man and two women because that's a problem of yichud. Abba Shaul is not concerned about yichud. Tosafot says because there's no yitzhara at the time of the cemetery and time of funerals, and therefore at least this type of yichud with two women, one man, we're not concerned. In Omdim ala b'shura, the normal procession we have after a burial is that the mourners stand and there's a line of comforters. Either one, the comforters are moving or the mourners are moving. Either way, there's a row of comforters. And that doesn't happen for a baby that passed away. There is no bracha that's given to the mourners upon this conclusion of the funeral. They don't comfort the mourners. However, the second step is a baby that's more than 30 years old. Then they take him out in a coffin. Rabbi Yehuda says, not a small, tiny coffin that's a little bit disrespectful that one person can carry on their shoulders. It has to be a sizable coffin that's respectable that it'd take two people to carry bagafine with their hands, with a pole. Once the baby is 30 days old, then they would have this procession of having a line of comforters after the burial to comfort the mourners. They give this bracha to the avelim to be comforted, and they would comfort him. If they're a year old, then they have the regular normal procession of a burial where they're brought out on a bed or a coffin on top of a bed, something that's very respectful. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says it doesn't depend on 1 year old. It actually has to be 2 years old to have the regular burial procession. However, either their age is 2 years old or their body, avara of their body is the size of a 2 year old, and then they would also have normal burial procession. Anytime there is a normal burial procession with a meter with a bed, then we would have the community grieve for this individual as well. They would come off work and come to the burial. If they're younger than that, they don't have normal burial procession. The public doesn't have to come to the burial. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said there's different criteria. It depends on whether the public knew about this child. Did he leave the house already? Rashi says. If the public was not aware of this child, so then they wouldn't come to the burial. Is there a hesped for the child? So this has totally different conditions than before. Rabbi Meir, Mishem, Rabbi Shmuel, Meir, Ani b'nei Shalosh, Ashirim b'nei Chamesh. Rashi explains that the poor people love their children, and to them they're so precious because they have nothing else in the world to care about. So once they're 3 years old already, then they would have to do a hesped for them because that's a tremendous loss for the poor people. Ashirim, however, the rich people, only when they're 5 years old is considered such a tremendous loss, tragedy to the family. and they would do a hesped. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo. Rabbi Yehuda quotes Rabbi Gamliel saying a different numbers. Aniyah b'nei chamesh, asher b'nei sheish. For the poor, it's only 5 years old, and for the rich, it's when they're 6 years old. B'nei zakeim b'nei aniyim. If someone's a couple that's older that has a child, they're considered, whether they're wealthy or rich, they're considered like the poor people. In other words, they love their children. It's very, very precious to them, their child. And if it's a loss, even at any age, it's a very big loss. And they would follow the numbers given for the poor people. So the statement of Gamliel in the first context was all talking about Rosh Hashanah, breaking Avelus, our Mishnah. However, in this context, Rav Gidel is quoted as saying we follow Rabbi Yehuda's numbers in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, that's for poor 5 years old and the rich 6 years old. Now, in counting the numbers that a holiday interrupts the morning and begins the Shloshim, Rav Anani explains to us that a holiday is always considered a full 7 days. It doesn't matter how long the holiday is. Pesach and Shavuos, Sukkot are opposite 7 days. However, in Shavuos, which is compared to those holidays, we're going to explain soon, is also considered like 7 days. And therefore, if there was a Shiva that began even 1 day, even just an hour before the holiday, that's considered a full Shiva, considered 7 days. And then comes the holiday, and the holiday is automatically considered another 7 days. So together, you have Shiva plus the holiday, which is another 7, automatically comes out as 14. And the Chiddush is even for Shavuos, this is correct, because Shavuos is compared to the other holidays, so it's considered 7 days. So therefore, the day before Shavuos, so Erev Shavuos is the burial, plus Shavuos together comes out 14 days, and therefore for Shloshim they only need another 16 days to complete the Shloshim. Shama Rabbi Ami, Veikbid Rabbi Ami heard this and he got upset. Oh, that Rabbi Nani's idea? No, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yoshia. That comes back to someone earlier who said that and they should have quoted him. Same parallel story. Kila de Reish Galusa. One, Rabbi Yisrael was on the porch of the Reish Galusa's house and saying this following: that the day before Shavuos plus Shavuos together make 7 and 7, 7 for the Shiva and 7 for the holiday. It's 14. Shamar Rav Sheshet got upset. Is that yours? Did Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yoshi? That really goes back to someone else who said that earlier. How do you know that there is a 7-day window of making up korbanos that are supposed to be brought on Shavuos? Because we have a comparison between Pesach and Shavuos. Just like Pesach has 7 days window to make up korbanos, so too Shavuos has that. And therefore, the constitution of Shavuos being 7 days, we find it in the world of korbanos, and we apply it to Avelus as well. Adabri Rav Papa Rav Avia Sava. Once Rav Papa was speaking to Rav Avia. Same idea as we had by Shavuos applies to Rosh Hashanah. 1 day before Rosh Hashanah breaks the Shiva, that's 7 days, plus Rosh Hashanah itself is like a holiday for 7 days. A bigger Chiddush, says Ravina, that a day before Sukkot, which is 7 days, like that Shiva that's broken, plus Sukkot is already 7 days, actually literally 7 days, and then Shmini Atzeret is also another holiday, so altogether that's 7, 7 and 7, that's 21, because Shmini Atzeret counts as another holiday. Ravina Iglu Lisur de Brad, and related Raviva Mizur de Brad, Ravina Amar Mar, Yom Halam Nerjan Harikan Arba'asar. Ravina went to visit by Surah, near the Euphrates, and Chaviva asked him, did you actually say that 1 day before Rosh Hashanah plus Rosh Hashanah together makes 14? All I meant to say is that I think that Pina Rav Gamliel is reasonable. There's a big machlok Rishonim, exactly what does that mean? To say, it means it's reasonable, but we don't necessarily have to follow that opinion. That's not exactly the halacha. Or that it is reasonable, we do follow it, or it's reasonable, and to say that this entire concept of considering it 14 days maybe makes sense by Shavuos, but doesn't make sense by Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah doesn't have this idea of bringing korbanos. It's not one of the regalim, and therefore doesn't have the same application as 14 days we have by Shavuos, by Rosh Hashanah. Mishnah. The 3 dinim that apply to relatives, first is to tear, kriya, on a loss of a relative, Cholton is to bear one's shoulder during the funeral, and Mavrin is a Suda Havra, a meal that's given to the mourners to eat by other people after the burial. That only applies to relatives. Other people, they come to the funeral, they can be sad, they can mourn, but they don't have these practices. In Mavrin El Amid as a Gufa, the way they had Suda Havra, the feeding this meal to the mourners, only happened on a upright bed, on a normal bed, not an overturned bed. That is the practice of mourners during Shiva, but not during this time of having the meal. Afilu Chacham, says the Gemara. We said for non-relatives, you don't usually mourn, you don't tear Kriya. What about for a wise person, for a Chacham? You don't tear Kriya? Tanya, we heard in a Bryce otherwise. Chacham Shemei Hakol Korova. The Bryce says that everybody is like a relative of the Chacham. Hakol Korova of Salvador. Does that go up in your mind? Is that actually literal to say everybody's actually relative of the Chacham? How can that be? El Hakol Kikrova. Everybody's like the relative of a wise person. And therefore, they're supposed to be tearing Kriya. Hakol Korin Alav. Hakol Cholton Alav. Hakol Marvin Alav Berachava. And everybody tears Kriya. Everybody bears their shoulder. And everybody is going to sit and have a meal of mourners, the Surah Havra, for the Chacham that died. Says the Gemara, okay, but the Mishnah is not talking about that. Okay, great. The Mishnah is not talking about that case. It's only needed for a non-Chacham. Says the Gemara, wait a minute, another person. There are other people that you also supposed to tear Kriya for. For example, a good individual. Someone who's considered Adam Kosher, who was fit, who was nice, who was good. Why does a person's children die when they are young? Chas v'shalom. Teach them the lesson that a person is supposed to mourn over someone who's good that passed away. Abel. So the Gemara, wait a minute. The children are going to die to teach them a lesson. Hashem is taking a collateral for the future to teach him this lesson. Rather, it's not for the future he's teaching, Hashem's teaching a lesson. Rather, Hashem is punishing him for not mourning someone who passed away, and that it was a proper person, he didn't mourn him correctly. Someone who does mourn correctly and cries over someone that died, they're forgiven for all their sins because of the respect that he gave him. It shows consideration for life when a person mourns someone else that was kosher. It shows consideration for their neshama, consideration for the good things that they did, and it's considered tremendous virtue. Someone who is callous and doesn't care about anybody by themselves. So that's what the Gemara is speaking about. That it's a tremendous chisaron, tremendous reason for punishment. Dilav Adam Kasher, who says the Mishnah, says the Gemara, the Mishnah was talking about a case of the person was not a decent individual, and therefore only the relatives have to mourn, not everybody else. Dikai Hasam. It says the Gemara, wait a minute, but there's a third category of people that a person should tear Kriya for. Not the Chacham, not the tearing Kriya for someone who's kosher, but rather, if you were there, B'shat, you see in the Neshama, if you were in the presence when this person died, then you have to tear Kriya. If somebody sees someone else, Jew, passed away, they have to tear Kriya. What's the comparative to? It's like watching Chas v'shalom, a Sefer Torah that is being burned, because every person is compared to a Sefer Torah. Rashi explains beautifully. This based on the idea that the neshama of a person is like a candle, and Torah is compared to a candle, and the neshama inspires the world with Torah and with light and with good things. And when that's lost, when the light of the neshama is extinguished, it's like a Torah that's being destroyed. Says the Gemara, okay, the Mishnah is not talking about any of these cases. The low kai hadam neshama, it was not discussing a person when they were present when the person died. The word for the week is hilkach, is therefore.